Namaste everyone and welcome back to my podcast Stories You Should Know by Misty. I hope you all enjoyed part 1 of episode 6 and in case you haven't heard it yet, you can still go back and listen to it and leave your comment if wherever you are listening allows you to. Also, please help in spreading the word about the podcast. I would love these voices to reach out to as many people as possible. This is episode 6 part 2. I'm in conversation with Farheen Raza Abbas, an American Muslim, mother of 3 and a COVID survivor.
So while I was living here, I organized a book club, and I was like, just for the women to kind of meet up and talk about books. And in that, I met a lady who had her own radio station here, and she was like, "You speak very well. Would you like to be on the radio?" And I was like, Me? Really? I was the one who always thought I had the best. My sister actually has a really good singing voice, so she sings even. So it was always like, Sakina has the good voice and talents. Farheen is just the better writer. So
that's a different kind of voice you need for singing. Yes. Different kind of voice you need for radio shows.
Yes. So then I was like, me? Okay, fine. And then they were like, yeah, we want to give you your own show and you can, it's 2 hours a week. And I did that for a good year and a half, almost 2 years, where once a week I would go in, have a 2-hour show on social issues and social topics and things that were, relevant. Right. And then on top of that, I felt like, well, I can do more. And while in that thought of doing more, and at this point, my youngest was, because the same 2 boys, my youngest was at that point about 5. And I was like, okay, he's going to start school soon. 4. He was 4. And I was like, he's going to start school soon. Should get that ready. And then I found out I was expecting again. I was like, well, fun. Every time I plan something.
Let's do this again.
Again, back into it. And so by the time my youngest was born, my middle one went into kindergarten. So he was going to school. I had a baby. And then I couldn't manage doing the radio show that long of a radio show going in. And it didn't justify finding, caregiver for 2 hours once a week. Because I was like, it doesn't really mean. And I was like, you know what? It's okay to take a break. So then I told my boss, I was like, I love doing this, but I think I just need a break. And it's too long. And I'm just going to take a little bit of a break and think about things. And at that time, I started listening to some podcasts and figure out podcasting. I was like, oh, this seems like a good way to go. And also during this time, I'm a very socially active person. Like I go to protests. I go and do interfaith things where, different people from different backgrounds sit together. We talk, we discuss, all in a very safe space that we're just discussing. We're not judging. We're not here to convert anyone. No converting. Unless you want to, that's your choice. But this is my religion. This is the way we work. And so I wasn't just active in my Desi community. I was very active in the non-Desi community. Like I am okay to go have coffee with white, black, Latino, whoever, and we're talking about elections and politics. Right. Got very politically active, so got very active in that, and had a baby, and then sat around thinking about what to do next. And in that meantime, there's this wonderful lady here who has another radio station. She's been doing it for like 18, 19 years. So she's a pillar of the community. She's an Indian national, so she's wonderful. And she does not, discriminate based on, even though all these things were happening at that time, that all these, Hindu Muslim riots and things always happening. Right. She never made it seem like it matters. She's like, no, we're all family here. Right. So then she reached out and said that, I used to listen to your show there and I was wondering where you went. And I was like, oh, I took a break and because the show was too long and I had a baby and whatnot. And she was like, why don't you come to my radio station and however long you want to do, whatever you want. And I was like, do you think if it's okay if I only do half an hour? She's like, sure. And then luckily because this was a bigger, the first radio station was very independent, so very small. This one is a bigger one where they have a staff that's doing things over there. So so the staff room has 2 people who are always there just working on the computer. So then I was like, can we try if I bring my son, give him an iPad, do you think you guys can just keep an eye on him? And luckily the office ladies, both of them, they're like, we love babies. Oh my God, we love them so much. So it's worked out in that sense. I would just take my son with me. And since it's only half an hour, it's really not that long. And he became so familiar with it that he knows that, okay, I'm going to sit in this chair and have my iPad, take my shoes off and
it was his half an hour of royalty and just sit there and enjoy.
uninterrupted, peaceful iPad time, and no one's
Right.
bothering me. And they were so sweet enough. They're like, give him the regular Wi-Fi. Why use your data plan? They put the Wi-Fi, it gets better Wi-Fi and stable. So every time I went, it was just a breeze. I would just walk in, drop him off, go right next door, do my half an hour, come back out. And then, but the thing is with the radios here, and I'm sure it's all over the world, there's regulations and things you can and cannot say
Right.
on the air. And, of course. So then I was like, well, I do want to use and say more things. But the one rule that we had in our radio station was don't talk about religion, because you don't
Okay.
want to offend anyone. Of course, it's like,
Right.
don't talk about it and don't take sides or anything, because that easily offend anyone at any point, because
Right.
listeners are variety. So who knows what anyone could be thinking. So then I was like, what if I did my own podcast again? And I was like thinking. And then I got a logo made. I did all that stuff. And I was like, I can do this. And so then in January of this year, I launched it with the blessings of my boss. So I still work at the radio station. I still have my weekly show, and
Right.
she's completely fine with me having my own thing. And so then I did the podcast, and just at first I started doing the podcast episodes alone, like just me talking about certain
Right.
misconceptions. And then I was like, you know what? I can bring on people and highlight how we do things normally. We're just regular people doing regular things, and
But since
there's a
you're
variety
talking
of people.
about your podcast, I'm very
Mhm,
interested to know how you actually thought about it. Because see, when we talk about podcasts, there are a lot of things you can do, a lot of things you
mhm,
can talk about. And your podcast, like the name itself is Musing of a Modern Muslim, right?
mhm.
How did you come up with it that, okay, this is what I want to talk about? I want to talk
Yeah.
about the community. I want to talk about Islam culture. I want to tackle the misrepresentation of the entire community. How did it exactly came into the picture?
Well, it came about because I went through 9/11 here, and I was in Boston when that happened. And if you know,
Right.
that's where the flights took off from, was Boston. So
Yes.
that airport is very dear to my heart, because that's the airport I used to travel anywhere.
Right.
When we were living in the Northeast, I was like, oh, Logan Airport is the airport. It's the only airport. So whenever after 9/11, and especially the day of, I was going to a college class. I remember I was in class, and suddenly, while the teacher was giving a lecture, and this was one of those required classes, anthropology, like half people are paying attention, half not. And then suddenly one of the kids goes like, oh my God, someone flew a plane into the building. And we're like,
Right.
what building? And then everyone, like, there was computers there, and everyone went on the computer, and we all saw. And then the teacher was like, I dismissed everyone, just go home, be safe.
Right.
And they're like, flights took off from Logan, and we're like, that's our airport, what happened? So after that, of course, Muslims and people who were even non-Muslims but just looked Muslim got like a lot of hate.
Yes.
And I'm sure you saw in the news, and I mean, people who were Sikh, just because they were wearing turbans, they were like, oh, that's a terrorist, let's beat them up. So it was
Right.
it was a bad time. Anyone who looked Muslim, you could even be like, you know a Bangladeshi auntie just walking on the street, and they saw a
Right.
sari, and they're like, oh, that's a
Right.
Muslim, let's beat her up. So it was pretty bad. And then of course that leaks into media. Of course, not just the news media, movies and TV, always
Right.
being painted as these bad people. And I'm not saying that there aren't. Like, I've even said in my podcast, yes, there are definitely bad people
Right.
out there, but that is the same situation for
You know,
everyone.
I actually believe when we have these kind of discussions over here in India, when I talk to people in my group, I have this point that it is not the religion, it's the person. Okay, it's
Hmm.
not any religion doesn't teach you to be a bad
No.
person. They don't teach you to kill someone. It's the person. It's how they grow
Hmm.
up. It's about what's there in their mind. That's how the things
Yeah.
are. I think that's exactly what you're saying. I understand that completely.
No, and I was like, I 100%, I'm not ever going to say that, no, all Muslims are good people. No, they're not. They're of course. And I can't say that all Hindus are good people. I can't say all
Exactly.
Christians are good people.
Right.
I can't say all Jewish are good people. Every community, even every family, has that odd person in it. So if our
Exactly.
little families can have oddities, and why can't our religion and communities?
Right.
And yes, people do say things and promote things that I definitely don't agree with at all.
Right.
But so after that, seeing a lot of the media, and especially movies and TV, portray us as all these like oppressed, backwards weirdos
Yeah.
who are just looking to hate on America, I was like, this is so. And of course, that perception leaks onto the society, and that's why these assumptions are made, where all Muslims are terrorists. And we're like, no, we're not. What kind of
Right.
nonsense is this?
You know, in one of your podcasts, I really love the fact that you address that how in movies and in shows they portray Muslims as either to be too depressed or like to be too liberal, and like either they're
Yeah,
just trying to get out of their own culture and be liberated somehow, or they're just absolutely cool with everything. They don't
yeah.
show the normal family, the normal culture, the normal upbringing.
Like the Amjanta, like, okay, that we're just like, hey, yeah, there are many of us who practice religion, but doesn't mean we highlight it as the big thing of our day. And then there are people who are very religious, but they're also in fields of work. They're doctors, lawyers, you know, all sorts of fields. So that's when I was, original title of the podcast was actually Musings of a Millennial Muslim. Because I was like, okay, millennials is a term. I'm technically a millennial, so I can play off of that. And I was like, okay, let me do that. But then, when I was kept saying it, I was like, it's a mouthful. It just seems so much. And now the word millennial uh, kind of means someone who is like very out there, very free thinking,
Right.
almost like a hippie. That's what I
Right.
think kind of
I think
equates
more
to.
of it also, every kid that's born of in from 2000 and later, I think it's been
Yeah.
associated with them more now.
Yes. And
Yeah.
they're technically Zennials. That's what the
Yes,
official term for them
exactly.
is.
Yeah,
But
that's true.
but it's assumed they're millennials.
Right.
So then I was like, okay, this needs to be changed a bit. So then I asked a few friends. I was like, what do you think? What would be a better word? And then it was funny. It was my son, my 10-year-old, who was like, what about modern? And I was like, that's actually
Hmm.
simpler. And
Yeah.
it means modern. It could mean like a modern thinking person, but it can also mean present day. It could mean multiple things, and that way I don't have to change everything about the podcast, because I liked how the M's kind of worked. Musings of a middle. So like the M3, the three M's. I feel like Karan Johar when I say this, because I'm like, okay, I'm like stuck on a letter.
Hmm.
Why am I stuck on this one letter? But I was like, okay, fine, I'll just play off of it. Um, and then someone even suggested that maybe remove Muslim. They're like, what if you made musings of a modern mind? And I was like, but I am a Muslim. I do like playing the identity, and I hope it doesn't make people think that this is a podcast about Muslims own, like a Muslim like preaching. So I keep
Right.
trying to say like, no, it's meant to be insightful. I hope that works. I hope that idea gets across. And I'm glad when you said that, you heard it and didn't think like, oh, this is a Muslim person talking about Muslims and
Right.
only
I
Muslims. It's not
absolutely loved it because when you started your podcast, like in the first, second, third episode, I was like, I was figuring it out. Like, this is so amazing. There are so many things, and she's so right. There were few things which I never realized, like about the misrepresentation when when you spoke about, how certain news is much more highlighted when it
Mhm.
happens, when it involves Muslim, and suddenly I'm like, oh yes, it happens this way. She is so right.
It-
This is how it
oh,
happens.
it's a systematic way that it's been done the same way. And this is not, I'm not saying anything new. It's just the same thing that's
Exactly.
been continued. And even on my radio show and this, I'm like, these are not new things. It's just that sometimes you might hear, you just never think about them. And then when you're like, wait a minute, that is true. I was like, if you, in my episode where I talked about how the stereotypes we face, I was like, there aren't very many positive Muslim characters in TV shows, which
Right.
are regular Muslims. Again, they're either looking for liberation and they just hate everything about their culture, or they're so oppressed. I was like, you
Right.
don't see the regular, average Muslim. And so when I highlighted the two examples I could think of, and I was like, they're just so random. One was in a TV show that they had here where they had this Muslim woman who was wearing hijab, who was just a regular person trying to free her brother from jail. And she was a
Right.
regular average American Muslim. And the actress won an award for that portrayal, which was even more highlighted because in real life she's not a Muslim person at all,
Right.
but just a good actress and portrayed it so well that it was like, good. This is
And
necessary.
it was something very which is common there, which is common over here, be it American movies, be it Indian movies, Indian TV shows. It's kind of something very similar. They
Yeah.
are portrayed in this particular, like, okay, very strict household. You cannot step out. You cannot say
Yes.
a word. It's how they set things in our mind. That's how you look at it. I mean, I'm friends with so many Muslim people. One of my best friend from school time is a Muslim, and I used to go to her house all the time. I used to see how it's the same. There was never
Yeah.
any difference.
Yeah. I think the only difference is, I think if you really go into the nitty gritty in like a Hindu Muslim household, is maybe their prayer styles, of course,
Right,
different
of
religions.
course.
or if you see a family that might be more practicing and they don't eat meat, like, okay, this is a, a vegetarian household
Right.
solely. So, or and then of course, I know like a lot of Muslim families in India, when they have Hindu friends coming over and they know like, oh, this person does not eat meat at all, they make sure to not
Right.
get any meat. They're like, no, we'll be respectful of that. And but they don't expect to go to a vegetarian's household and be like, oh, serve me meat. They're like, no, we will happily eat vegetarian. It's okay, it's actually
Right.
better for you anyways. So you should. But so when the podcast came about, I was like, okay, let me think of topics to talk about. And that's why I did solo first, just, and they were shorter episodes. Then I started doing more interviews of people and just highlighting how regular Muslims do things. And so now it's more interview style, but that doesn't mean that I might have an episode randomly just like ranting and raving about what I'm thinking. And so it's going well. So I'm like, okay, good. There are people listening. I see like little numbers like, oh, good, good.
And
And
I
I'm like,
like the part
okay,
that you always include a story from your life. It's very
yes.
nice. It's very relatable because, like in one of your podcasts, I did hear about the 9/11 incident when someone came
Mhm.
to your father's store and asked about the American spirit. It
Yes.
was it was so amusing for me. I was like, he asked for he said American spirit, and suddenly you realize it was a cigarette, and your mom gave it to him.
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
like, this is so real.
And that's why I think you have to, when you want to someone to listen to you, you have to be relatable. So I always try to make fun of myself sometimes in my podcast. I'm like, yeah, I'll poke fun at myself, because then I'm trying to get on your level. Like, okay,
Right.
look, I record an episode where I'm going to be talking to a Black Muslim American, and we're talking about this whole Black Lives Movement and this. And I'm going to preface the episode that yes, I used to have a lot of thoughts because of the society. Even though I grew up in New York with a lot of Black people and had Black friends, but there was always these institutionalized things because of our culture that, oh, people of a certain
Right.
skin tone are the other.
Do you think that when you started your own podcast, and I'm not talking about the people in your family or anyone who's related to you, I'm talking about the people around you from the same culture, from the same religion, when you started the podcast and they knew that, what kind of message you're giving out, what you're telling out to people, was there any bad feedback or a backlash you got that saying that, okay, why are you telling people all these things? This is not the right teaching. This is
Yeah.
not we teach.
Oh
How did you deal with
yeah.
it?
I just say, well, if you don't agree with my ways, make your own podcast. do, do yourself then. Fine. I mean, and I always preface anything. I was like, look, I'm not a religious authority, but I can get you one if you really need one. I
Right.
try to do my own research, and that's why everything I say, I'm like, look, this is my research, my thoughts. Don't take this as a thought of every single Muslim in the world. Definitely not. So it's just
Right.
me, Farheen Raza, talking about my observations and my research. And then I will, try to say, hey, if you ever have a question about Islam or something specific, and
Yes.
I've gotten tough questions many times. So I'm like, if I don't have the answer, there are plenty of religious resources I can reach out to and say, hey, I have a question from someone. What is the best answer I can give them? This person's non-Muslim and they're asking. And
And did
I have,
anyone, yeah,
go
and did
ahead.
anyone actually, came up to you or maybe said that, by your podcast, you're trying to convert people. This is the reason why you started it.
No,
Because
no,
that's
luckily
good.
no one has said that. I hope no one thinks that. But I also, I do preface a lot of the episodes when I'm talking about pure Islamic things that, look, my thoughts,
Right.
not meant to convert you. And I think I've learned this over time when I do these interfaith things where the goal is not to convert. Like, we're
Yeah.
not here to convert. We're here just to listen about
Right.
how we are similar, how we are different. And that has helped me, kind of just listen and explain my beliefs in a way that I'm just informing you. It is not meant to, like, you'll never see me in my episode say, like, oh, Islam is the best religion ever.
Right.
Like, I'll say, this is the belief system in Islam. This is the thing that is being portrayed or misconstrued. Like when I talked about women, I was like, we never really hear the story of the Prophet's wife, who was a businesswoman and, older than him
Right.
and already had an empire, and she was independent. So it's
Right.
like, well, we don't highlight that. Why don't we highlight that? We should
and
be
and
highlighting.
i and I heard it there in one of your shows. You said that, in Islam they tell to teach everyone. It's like everyone should be educated. No one says that, okay,
Yes.
don't teach girls, don't get them educated. It's
No,
never there.
no,
And it's
no.
actually a very big misconception throughout the world, not just in America, that
Yes. Everywhere.
in Muslim
Everywhere.
culture, that, do not get the girl educated, which is a very big problem in every religion, every culture, be it Hindu,
Yes,
Muslim, Sikh, Isai,
everyone.
everywhere. Yeah,
No, and it's sad because again, and they blame the religion, where the
exactly.
religion, like I said, the first world word revealed to the prophet in the Quran was ikra, which means read, like
Read.
read. And it doesn't say, men read, women read. Read, just everyone read something. Read anything you can. And yeah, so it's again the misconceptions, and that's what I hope with the podcast. I like, hopefully, someone hears it and says, oh, I always thought that they weren't allowed to be educated, because I've actually gotten this question in interfaith events that, oh, I thought women aren't allowed to be educated. And I was like, no, that'd be very bad then.
Right.
And all these women who are educated, who are doing these things, then we wouldn't have them. So we have to, highlight where it's due. I mean, if again, if someone like Benazir Bhutto was not, educated and made her way up, she would not be would have been a prime minister of Pakistan, which
Right.
I think even in
Which
America
happened
we've
a
never had a
way
woman
earlier. Right. Which happened way
years
earlier.
ago in the
Right.
80s. So I was like, this was before, a lot of things, and it was so normal. It wasn't considered like, oh, how will this woman run, because she was very qualified. And it was like, okay, we still don't have a female president or vice president or anything. We're still struggling with that. We have an
Right.
orange thing. I can't talk about him. I hate him so much.
Let's well we have the same views, so
Yes. I think everyone does.
I think everyone in the world knows it. We don't
Yes.
have to justify it by saying about
No,
it.
no,
Yeah.
no, no. No, and then so that's why the podcast just came about that. And then I know in the beginning of this you had asked me about hijab. And
Yes.
yes, I was always, I never really, followed it. But then about, I don't know, almost 2 years ago, I kind of felt like, what if I did? What if I, it's nothing hard. I don't technically dress where Islam tells you, that there's a certain dressing style. I don't dress against that code. So I pretty much dressed modestly. And I was like, well, it wouldn't be a big stretch to put an extra piece of fabric on my head. So I did. And I did it and you know what, Tarushi, when I did it, within a month, I kind of was like, this is not me, like immediately almost. And I was like, this is not for me. But I was like, wait, you know what? If I've made this decision, I need to give it a good effort. A
Right.
good enough effort for me is that I need to go to events. I need to go to a wedding. I need to go to almost everything with this on and see how I live my life. And so I did a good year and a half, almost 2 years of wearing hijab. And that's why my podcast logo still has a character in hijab.
And did things change for you right after you started wearing it? You know, how the perception of people around
Yes.
you?
It was funny. The worst perception I got was from my own community. And I highlighted in one of the episodes where people who almost never talked to me because I didn't wear it, suddenly I was in the in crowd. And
Wow.
everyone was like, oh, good job. And I was like, I was like, it's nice to be, included. But I was like, but I didn't want to be included because of this. Does that mean you don't agree with Farheen Raza, everything else? Or Farheen Raza needs to put something on her head to be agreeable to you? So I went through this whole, like, self-discovery about it. And then about right after COVID, actually, I and you would think having that illness and going through it, I'd become like, oh, I should do more. I definitely believe in my faith. I still practice it, and I still, love it. I'm not going to leave it. But I was like, I don't think this is making me a better Muslim. And more so now with this Black Lives Matter movement, I'm seeing people who will happily preach that, oh yeah, Islam is against injustice and we need to stand up for people, and yet conveniently they're quiet when
Right.
there is injustice happening. Because a lot of people equate justice meaning justice from Muslims only, which
Right.
is the wrong perception. Our teachings do not say that. They say stand up for anyone. There is even, a very important saying of the Prophet that's being highlighted now, that he said that when there was a funeral happening of a Jewish woman, he stood up. And people were like, his followers were like, why are you standing up, Prophet? That's a Jewish woman. He's like, that's a human. And,
Exactly.
you
Right.
need to stand up.
It's the
So that
human life that matters.
exactly. So it's like, it's a human. It does not mean whoever or whatever. And so I find it very interesting that a lot of people who portray Islam, or who, by their looks and their dress code and their posts look like they're Muslims, I I personally, just me myself, sometimes doubt that. I'm like, well, you're following all the good parts, but then the tough parts where our teachings tell us to stand up
Right.
for people, to speak out, to make posts, to do things,
I
to
think I think
show.
Fareen, that's kind of in every culture. I will not just say in
It
your
is.
culture. I mean, you are telling me yes from your point of view, but I can easily say it's the same thing in my culture. It's the same
Yeah.
thing in my friend's culture. We all are tuned this way that, whenever something good is happening, you always have to be a part of it.
Yes.
Whenever something is happening where you have to take a stand, things get pressurized from your family. Like I take part in a lot of protests. I'm very out there. I speak my
Yeah.
mind. So I continuously have these clashes with my family members, with my friends. There are people who are telling me that, don't be a part of this. Why are you being part
Yeah.
of this mess? And I'm like, if I will not stand right now, how will I expect someone else to do it for me?
Exactly. So then that's when and then let me just backtrack a bit. So after this pandemic reached, American shores, of course, it had
Yes.
started in December in China. And at that time, even though this was, known, our administration did not make the necessary steps to prevent it from happening. Because
Right.
if you go back a few more years, well, a lot of years, Ebola even came to the US, but
Right.
because at that time the administration was aware of it, they made sure that it didn't spread as much. And there was, I think, only 2 or 5 cases in the entire
Also,
US.
the
And of those,
means of spread was way different than what currently COVID
yes,
is and how it's spreading.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And but this administration really just kind of dropped, as they say, dropped the ball completely. Like
Right.
there was a lot of denial. There's still a lot of denial that it even exists, and it's like, well,
Absolutely. Yeah.
people, we have the highest death rate. The
Right.
United States has the highest death rate in the world, which is not a place I think any country wants to be, but definitely not the US, which is known for being, this progressive first world
Right. Don't
country.
worry, India is climbing the same stairs right now, so I'll
I,
not
I think
comment on it. It's neck to neck now.
everywhere we talk to family in Pakistan, and no one is taking any, cares. Especially with
Right.
Eid happening last week, people were like out and about having fun, and now the spread is growing, and it's like, this is not normal. I don't know why people keep thinking this not. And if you look historically, pandemics only happen once every 100 years. So it's like
Exactly.
literally this is once in a lifetime, hopefully once in a lifetime event, but it will run its course. And you can only, my mom has a new belief. She's like, the people who will survive this will be the ones who are careful,
Yeah.
and the ones who will not are the ones who are just not listening. And unfortunately, this president has made this virus into a living thing. So now it's a democratic virus that's made up by, this one party. And it's like, how I was like, I have never thought in my lifetime I would think that someone can make a disease have feelings,
Exactly.
because it's a
Right. True.
disease. It doesn't care. It does not
True.
care. And if you look at everything, there was even some very funny thoughts in the beginning from some Muslims I know who were like, oh, you know what, we are followers of Allah, this virus will not get us. And I was like, yeah, and look at Iran.
There was this one
Look at
video I
Iran.
saw somewhere where someone was saying that, I have Jesus blood on me, I'll not get sick. And there's this people in India who are saying that, you know what, we'll drink a cow's pee and we'll be absolutely fine. So there are like different kind of beliefs all over,
Yeah,
and no
yeah.
one's
and,
taking
and
it
i'm like
seriously.
and I'm like, look at one of the biggest countries affected was Iran, which is a Muslim country. I mean, they had a pretty decently high death rate as well, and effect rate.
Right.
And they had to, shut down the whole country, which good, they did. But here the lockdown started middle of March, and slowly they've eased up. People are out and about and doing things
Yeah.
regularly. And my husband says, I'm seeing numbers grow daily. He's like,
You
I
know,
don't know
I,
what
I
to say to
really
people
want to
anymore.
know because now you have a first-hand experience of how
Hmm.
painful this disease is, this virus
Hmm.
is. From what I know, April 5th was the day when you started having those back
Yes,
pains and everything.
yes,
How did you discover like how difficult was it? Because you are a mom of 3 kids. It's not just you that who you're taking care of. The kids
yeah.
are involved, your husband is involved. How was it exactly?
Okay, so it's exactly right. That backache that started, and I thought it was something, nothing. I was like, okay, we're all home. Maybe it's just, tiredness, whatnot. It was funny that that same night when I went to bed, and the next day when I was still feeling the same way, my husband was like, I think you have COVID, like immediately. And I think it's because, insight, because he's seeing it. So he was
Right.
like, I think you have it.
And he
We
was
were
in
being
direct
very
contact
careful.
also, so
We
maybe it
were
was like a high risk, even though if he was very careful.
No, it was because we had to backtrack in our minds, like, okay, where had I been that I could have
Right.
caught it? So in the 5 to 6 days prior to the symptoms beginning, the only place I had been to was a grocery store, and where I had a mask and gloves and everything. And then we're like, well, that's a possibility, but the more highlighted possibility was my husband said that 5 days before your symptoms, I saw a COVID patient. And I was in the room for not long and I had my gear on. But as soon as I left the room, me and the nurse were talking outside. We didn't have any masks or anything on because you'd think
Right.
you're in the hallway now, but the air is circulating. And again, this virus is surviving on surfaces much longer than any other virus.
Right.
So he's like, my thought is that. And then he got really worried because um, I start symptoms on Sunday night, and by Monday afternoon, that same patient that he had seen again on Sunday. So he saw him, 6 days prior to that. Then he saw him again on Sunday. By Monday after that, that patient was on a ventilator. So then my husband was scared. And this is a young, and he's like, the patient's not old. He's, I believe, 41, 42,
Right.
healthy, exercises, fit guy, not on any medication. So no underlying condition. So he's like, I'm worried now because what if it is the same strain and you have it and you're going to be an event. Basically, in his head, my husband had already planned my funeral. He's like, ye to mar jayegi, and I'm going to have to raise these kids alone. And that's it.
Oh
Like, he was
God.
so ready for me to die. And I was like, what weird insan. I was like, being married to a doctor, they're always in extremes. They're the worst patients themselves. They are horrible.
I think they
Like,
think
the
about
man
kids
can
a
get a
lot,
cold.
right? Especially because
When
of
he
the
has a
family.
cold,
Yeah.
when he has a cold, it's like an upper respiratory, like lung failure. I'm like, it's a cold. Have some soup. And so he had already, like, basically in his head buried me. He's like, I'm gonna have to raise these kids alone. What am I gonna do? Dusri shadi karu. And I was like, I don't give you permission. There you go. He tells that to anyone else, and they're like, what kind of husband are you?
Just a
He's like,
practical one.
I'm like, very realistic. But then so if you saw my video, I got the test done and it was done incorrectly. And this is a
Yes.
big problem, Tarushi, that the test is being done incorrectly all over, not just here, all over,
So true.
because that swab has to go pretty far up your nose. I mean,
Exactly.
it technically, if you look at any images, it cannot hit your brain, but it feels like it's pretty darn close to your
Like
brain.
you need to feel that, oh my God, what happened to me?
Yeah, you feel
Yeah.
like a tickle, like in the middle back, but really there's enough of a membrane in between, like it can't harm you. And even if they poke it in there, like really it can't.
Right. I think
So
that's the biggest problem that's happening right now with the
yes.
testing.
So and because the test is not the best one, really it's not. I mean, to go that far back into someone's nose, because a flu test and any other test, you just swab a little bit on the cheek and it's like it's enough. But because this one is so interesting and so unique, that it's being done wrong a lot of times. So when my first test came negative, it caused more worry and anxiety because it was like, this is not flu season. The weather is hot. There's no other illnesses going around. You don't have allergy symptoms. It became more worrisome. Like, what is it then? Because then it's like the fear of the unknown. Okay, if it's
Exactly.
not COVID, what is it?
Then what is
And
it?
then my brain went to overdrive. I was like, what if I have like bone cancer and I never knew it? And I'm like dying, like literally dying right now. So then
Wow.
I was killing myself. I was like, okay, I'm dying in my head. So then we were looking and my symptoms were not improving. And the pain, the body pain, I would describe as having childbirth pain. If anyone knows what that is like, but all over your body, in every single nerve ending you have. It was pain. So by the fifth day, it was not getting better. And I was not improving it anyway. It was a stagnant pain. And I had no fever. So when the places are checking fever, it's such a waste of time. I had no fever at all. Never above, not even elevated fever. It was
Yeah,
normal
I
temperature.
mean, a lot of different kind of symptoms are seeing. Lots of patients are not even showing symptoms. So
No,
it's very difficult now.
it's a lot of asymptomatic carriers out there,
Right.
a lot more than symptomatic. So, and especially children are asymptomatic carriers and they're spreading it
Right.
happily without doing anything. So then we were like, okay, we need to get a separate test done again. So then we found an independent lab. We fill out the forms, and that lab would send someone to your house. So that person came and did the test, and she did it incorrectly as well. This other and then my husband was there, and and then he's like, do you mind if I do it? And then
Yeah.
she's like, are you sure? He's like, I'm a doctor. And she's like, okay. So then he literally shoved it up my nose. And I was like, ye to badla le rahe hain, pata nahi kis kiss cheez ka.
Like, you're not dying today, woman.
Yes, like both noses. And I was like, oh my God. But then when that test came back positive, that's what made us realize, number one, that this test is not being done right. Number
Right.
two, that, okay, yeah, I have COVID. And number three, how to prepare for this. And again, this has already been a week and a half of this because the test was so slow and coming back. So that unknown time, that anxiety time, a lot of tears, a lot of like, blaming so many
Right.
things and just being like, this is so annoying. Um, it was a time where also a lot of people stepped up. A lot of people in my community, they were like, we're just going to drop off food in your front porch. Don't come out. We don't want to see you. That's fine.
Right.
So I didn't have to cook clean. But luckily, my husband told his work and they were like, he had a few days off, but then he had to go back again because the patient numbers were growing so much
Exactly.
that he was like, there's really no time off. But then his bosses were like, you know what, do this, do the actual patient thing up front, but then go home and do your notes and any computing time you have to do that at home. So then that's what he was doing. He was barely going to work for like 3 hours, 4 hours a day. And again, Steve Jobs, thank you for inventing the iPad, because that got me through, because I would just wake up in the morning and then give the kids the iPad. Luckily, my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old are sufficient enough. They can make a bowl of cereal. They can, eat pancakes. There are so many food items they can eat that are easy to do. And then my 10-year-old he's like an old man. He's an old soul. He
Right.
has always been that way. So even with my 2-year-old, he was more helpful. He was able to, give him milk in a bottle or
Were
even
you ever
change his diaper.
scared that, your kids might have caught the same virus?
We assumed that everyone had it in the house. We just made the
Okay.
assumption that all of us have it. So let's no one leave this house except for my husband for work. No one
Right.
left the house. We had groceries delivered, and luckily, like I said, people were dropping off so much food every other day that we had so much food that. And people knew that I have kids, so they were dropping off pastas and pizzas and kid friendly things. So it was like, okay, we have food, we're good. And again, my 10-year-old was sufficient enough that he could warm up pizza in the microwave.
Right.
They can make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. They were able to feed themselves enough that they were like, mom has COVID, we're not bothering her. And then my husband would come home, and then he was more sufficient taking care of everything else. But yeah, and it was hard for my mother at this time because my mom is inherently a nurturer, and she was like, how can I just fly down there and take care of you? And we were
Right.
like, you stay put,
I
do not move.
think that's the first instinct of a mother, right? She wants to be
Yes.
there to protect the child.
Yes. And then she was like, if I was there, I could at least cook and I could do that. I was like, Amma, don't worry.
Yeah.
We have food. We're not worrying about cleaning or anything. It's okay. It's a different time to be in. She was just like ready to just come down. And we were like, look, you're older. You've had cancer. You've beat cancer. You are in that, no, stay away from us. And even if, let's say, you don't catch it from me, my husband is still seeing patients daily. He could always be a carrier. So
Right.
even if we come visit you, we could be carrying from him indirectly. So our family were very careful about social distancing. We're like, look, we have to, in this time, a lot of people are behaving very selfishly, that I want a haircut, so open up salons and I need to get my nails done. And we're thinking like, this is a time to be selfless.
Right.
And it's for the betterment. I mean, I would love to go, sit with my friends and hang out and do everything, but we're being cautious. So actually, it's funny. We've planned this Sunday to meet up in a parking lot, sit in our cars separately in our trunks, and just talk at a very big distance. Like, we'll just see each other far away and,
Right.
hi, how are you doing? And yell at each other, through windows. But it's interesting. And in this time, and then now with this whole the virus was not in control as it is. And now with this Black Lives Matter movement and the
Right.
riots and the protests, which are also necessary, it's just, timing is just,
Just
it's just,
timing is just too bad. I think. Yeah.
timing is just off. And, it's not their fault. I mean, their people are
Absolutely
suffering
not. Right.
incredible, years and hundreds of years of suffering.
It
And
shows, it actually shows that the suffering is so much that they do not care about the fact that a virus will kill them. They're more worried about another human being will kill them one day.
yes,
So it's better to
yes,
be there out on the roads and do this and not worry about the virus. I mean,
yes.
it's I I cannot say if it's selfish, it's selfless, it's them. What they're
Yeah.
doing, whatever they have
No,
to do
no.
to survive.
Whatever they're suffering through, it is so many hundreds of years of suffering that it's come to a boiling point. It was like a pressure cooker. It was
Exactly.
going, pressure nikal gaya, and now it's like bas phat pada. It's like okay,
Right.
and
True.
you know what? I think uh, again, this president, this administration is not helping it. He always turns everything about himself. So then it's like never, and it's very interesting when you even look, the words are right there. Whenever people are protesting his causes, he's like, oh, they're good people, and anyone who's protesting this is thugs and we're violent. So it's like,
Yes.
you no one is happy right now. And even though the black community and minority communities do get the virus more often, there's statistics that prove that this community is actually suffering more from COVID. But again, like you said, they don't care anymore. They're like, we're suffering all the time. So what's one more thing? Let's just do this. And I think this is the first time. I was watching the news yesterday where they said that all 50 states in the US have protests about
Right.
this. Protests are happening internationally. Canada, UK, Australia. This is triggering so many people, and they are so mad right now because. And I asked a black friend of mine. I was like, why this case? Why this one? I'm not saying the other ones are not important, but why this one? Why did this one trigger so much? She's like, because Farheen, the things that we tell our black men and children and boys, especially about police, always cooperate, address them as sir, don't
Yes.
fight back, don't resist, don't try to run. This man did all those things. Like
Right.
if you look at all the video, he is not fighting back, he's just
Right.
listening. And for that to happen to him, it was like, well, then we're doing what we thought was the safest option and you still
Right.
are not listening. Well, okay, then we're gonna take to the streets. And I, like I said, I happily would go to protest. But again, I'm thinking that I know I could be a COVID carrier at all times,
Right.
because it's assumed that by 2 weeks you're not contagious, but that's just an assumption. And my husband's like, everything is so new about this, we might learn that you could be contagious for 6 months, who knows, we don't
Right.
know yet.
I think you're
So
doing
then
your bit by staying home, by talking about it, by because
I'm
you have
talking about it.
your own way of reaching out to people, so you
Yeah,
are
and
doing
that's
it.
why I'm interviewing people who are in the movement. And then what we did the other day, we went to our regular grocery shopping, and then protesters were right outside the grocery store. It's hot, it's very hot here right now. I believe in centigrade it's like 40 degrees here.
Oh wow.
It's pretty hot. And
Spot.
they're standing outside in signs. So then me and my husband, we bought ice cold water cases, like 5 6 cases, and we're like, this is what we can do, we can give you guys water in this heat, and
Right.
hopefully this counts as something. And they were so grateful. And I said, I had my mask on, I was like, I would join you, but I went through COVID, I don't want to give it to you. So
True.
here, water, cold water. We bought them watermelon slices the other day too. We're like, just something, if they're standing out there, at least if I can't be there this way, I can be there in other ways. And
Right.
that's what I've been telling people who are like, I don't know what to do. I was like, you don't have to go to a protest, that's just an outward sign. You can donate, you can give water, you can use any platform, your social media, to talk about it, that this is. And I'm actually going after in a different way too. I'm like, black lives do matter, but we have to learn within our desi diaspora this whole idea of fairness creams and all these things. This is so wrong. And
Right.
I know I can easily say that because I'm a fair skin tone, but my sister isn't. And we've always heard a lot of this, like, oh, iski shadi to ho jayegi, uski kaise hogi. And it's like, this is so wrong. There are so many beautiful, skin tones and beautiful girls who are so qualified. And because of something that isn't in their control, they're considered less than.
Right.
As like such extreme, like,
I
as
think this
jahalat, as we
this
say.
this movement kind of brought out a lot of very important issues, not just
Hmm.
internationally. Like when I talk like someone who's in India right now, and culturally, if I talk about this kind of thing has been happening since a very long time.
Yes.
Be it with minorities, be it with people of certain communities, things like honor killing has been happening, and
Yes.
so it's just bad, and it doesn't just happen for one person. It just doesn't just happen with few people. It's happening everywhere throughout the country. So a movement like this makes us talk about a lot of things that's happening over here as well,
Yeah.
and
I
people
think
are
because
talking
you
about it.
you can't support a movement if you have these institutionalized things in your own home. And by home, I don't mean your house. I mean your
Right.
community. Like
You
your
know, we
own
got a
people
lot
have
of
this.
lot of people in India, they got a backlash on the fact that they were supporting the movement that Black Lives Matter. Not
Hmm.
because that they were supporting them, but because of the fact that they never recognized the issues of their own country.
Yes,
They never recognized the lives of their own people, so they got a lot of
exactly.
backlash that how hypocrite you are, that just because everyone's doing it internationally, you got to do it
Yes,
so that you look cool, urban cool, and you look
yes.
aware of that
I,
situation.
I, you know, the funny thing is, I think the same problem I heard of Pakistan too. That they're like, "Oh, Black lives." Like, well, what do you mean? I mean, there's issues of people, harming domestic help. About domestic help, this, like you said, when people in India and Pakistan are supporting these movements, which I see the intention, because okay, maybe it might be an urban, cool thing to do, or it's just, you really believe in it.
Right,
But again, you have to recognize your own faults with it. And with domestic help, like, I've seen images from both India and Pakistan where they'll show a very posh urban family. They'll be at a restaurant and their help will be sitting right there, but not allowed on the same table, or not even fed. Like, you're
right,
there to watch the kids, but you can't eat here. And I remember when we would go to India and Pakistan, let's say we went to McDonald's or something, then we would get food for ourselves, and we'd get food for the help. Like, me and my sister, my brother, we'd treat them as equal. And then the response was like, don't do that, they'll get ruined, and they'll
right.
expect these things. And I can see both sides, because I know things do happen, in all ways. But it's just like, because we didn't grow up with that thought, that we were like, oh, why, we shouldn't treat people like that. So I think a lot of people need to recognize that in your own households, in your own minds, you have these negative, or not the most equal thoughts towards everyone. Once you recognize that, then you can, support movements that, scream for equality for a certain race of people.
That was Farheen, and this was her story. You can also watch this podcast on my YouTube channel. Just search for Tarushi Chaudhary and you will find it. This episode was very special to me. It gave me a chance to connect with someone 8,000 miles away. Listening to stories like these is what this podcast is all about. I'm extremely happy and so proud to tell you that it's been an entire month since I launched this podcast. Your love and support are what's motivating me every day to do better. So thank you so much for listening, for being there, and for sharing your stories with me. It's a difficult time for every one of us, and we all are in this together. So stay safe for yourself and your loved ones. Help someone in need if you can, and be kind. I'll be back next week. This is Misty signing off.